Welcome, AP people, to Unit 9, Topic 9.2. This is Technological Advances and Limitations After 1900. We're talking about disease. Here we go. What will we learn? Well, diseases from the natural environment, as well as medical and scientific developments, had a significant effects on populations around the world. All right. The skill we're going to use is document analysis and argumentation with 3 documents. Okay. So technological advances and limitations after 1900 with a very specific focus on disease. Explain how environmental factors affected human populations over time. Mr. D, what theme are we talking about here? Right. Humans and the environment, right? Human interaction with the environment. So we're going to break this down into categories, all right? We're talking about diseases that are associated with poverty, and now the geographic implications of that are third world countries, right? With weak economic systems, weak political systems that are just completely engrossed in poverty. And when we talk about that, the major diseases are malaria, tuberculosis, and chloria. And we're also going to talk about emergent epidemic diseases in terms of the 1918 influenza pandemic. My goodness, so similar to what's going on right now, Ebola and HIV and AIDS. We're also going to talk about diseases associated with governments and countries with strong economies, industrialized first world nations, where people had increased longevity, people who live longer. We're talking about heart disease and Alzheimer's disease. Let's go. Important definitions to carry with you along this presentation. Mr. D, what is an epidemic? Well, that's a sudden outbreak of disease in one specific geographic location. What's a pandemic? Well, a pandemic is an outbreak of disease that spreads over vast geographical regions and globally, like the coronavirus COVID pandemic, the global pandemic, right? What is endemic, Mr. D? I have no clue. Well, endemic is a disease that persists over time and becomes more common. It sustains within a community. It's commonly found in a region, okay? Like the seasonal flu, right? All right, let's focus more on diseases associated with poverty. Right out of your presentation, we're going to focus on what you need to know. So the historical developments here. Diseases associated with poverty, they persisted while other diseases emerged as new epidemics and threats to human populations, in some cases leading to social disruption. So malaria, tuberculosis, and chloria are found in areas associated with poverty, with a weak economic system, with weak government, social assistance to the people, and these are diseases that break out as epidemics, and some of them are also endemic as well because they just persist over time in these societies. What are other types of infections? Well, parasitology. This is where you would travel to a country that has weak economics, weak government system, and poor infrastructure. So their water supply and their water system constantly gets infected with microbes that can make you sick. So treating diseases related to poverty, it's often not profitable. So many treatments are difficult to obtain, and there is a reduced funding for research here. So parasitology is, I mean, you go to a third world country and they tell you don't drink the water because the water has, the bacteria in that water has never entered your digestive system. Therefore, your immune system can't fight it off and you get sick. Case in point, Mexico, certain regions of Mexico with weak infrastructure, they call it Montezuma's revenge. Diseases associated with poverty, malaria. Malaria is a mosquito-borne infectious disease of humans and other animals, and the disease is widespread primarily in tropical and subtropical regions in a broad band around the equator, including much of sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and the Americas. You take a look at the map here and look at this. So right across the equator, heat and humidity. Heat and humidity is where these malaria outbreaks occur in the tropical regions, all right? And then you can also think about the social, political, the economic implications here of these regions, all right? Does the government have a strong social system and strong economic system to provide that medical technology to people in these regions? And the answer for most of the region is not so much. Okay. We're also talking about tuberculosis as a disease associated with poverty, especially in developing and first world countries in the early part of the 20th century. So it's short for tubercle bacillus. It's common and in many cases lethal. It's an infectious disease that attacks the lungs, but also can affect other parts of the body. It kills more than 50% of those infected. All right. So now they've developed vaccines over this, and this is not a major problem in the world anymore, but it does persist in third world countries. All right. It caused the most widespread public concern in the 19th and early 20th centuries as an endemic disease of the urban poor, including the United States of America. All right. In 1815, like 1 in 4 deaths in England was due to what they called consumption. And by 1918, 1 in 6 deaths in France by TB or tuberculosis. Look at the prevalence of TB here. And now you can think about this. What are the economic implications of the prevalence of TB that are reflected in this chart? And then that's a simple AP question. You know, you can say these are countries where governments have weak infrastructure, weak political governmental support systems, and weak economic systems in order to provide accessibility to medical assistance and vaccinations for TB, right? Other diseases emerged as new epidemics and threats to human populations. Now we're talking about epidemics that develop into pandemics, all right? Let's take a look. The 1918 influenza pandemic, global pandemic. We're talking about Ebola, which was more of an epidemic, and HIV/AIDS, which was more of epidemic based. All right, let's look at these epidemics. So 36.1 million people have AIDS on planet Earth, a current global health crisis, right? Especially problematic in sub-Saharan Africa. Very weak government systems, very weak infrastructure, very weak social systems to provide the people with the technology, the medical technology they need. So only those in wealthy countries have access to those advanced treatments, right? So it's still a problem in Africa, but there have been recent technological medical breakthroughs with treatments for living the duration of your prolonged life with HIV or AIDS. So look at this, the emergent epidemic disease AIDS in certain areas of the world. And there are economic, social, political, and economic implications to this chart as well that are very common and similar to my other explanations, correct? You're right. All right, look at this, the yellow line here, people living with HIV globally, and you can see that that's increasing. So the implications of this chart are due to new technological advances. People are living longer lives with HIV and or full-blown AIDS. Now let's think about the 1918 influenza pandemic. This was the big one. 50 to 100 million people around the world. And that's a 3 to 5% of global population. Millions of soldiers in 1918 returned home, possibly spreading the flu. It became a pandemic in 1919. Look at that bottom picture. What are they wearing? Can you empathize? Look at death rates when the Spanish flu broke out in October, and you can see that is an epidemic when it was just regionally, explodes, and then it spreads and becomes a pandemic. Look at the big picture on the right. Why? What are they wearing on their faces? Can you empathize, right? It's amazing how some things are cyclical, right? All right, now let's take a look at some diseases that occur at a higher incidence merely because of increased longevity. You live longer because the country you live in has a strong government system with strong social programs, strong medical system, strong infrastructure, strong economy. And for all of those reasons, you have arguably a longer period of life that you would live, increased longevity. So what are the problems? Heart disease and Alzheimer's disease as you get older. So now take a look at this chart, 1950, and they're predicting all the way to the year 2050, life expectancy by region. I mean, this is the world. And it's also broken down into Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, the Caribbean, and North America. All of the lines seem to be increasing, right? So you can see life expectancy is increasing on planet Earth. Heart disease and death rates adults above 35 by county in the United States of America. We can have a very long argument and discussion about the implications of this chart, social, political, economic, cultural implications of this chart, right? So heart disease is health related, which directly connects to the nutritional value of the food you eat. Why is the area red in these certain areas of the United States? How is that nutritional value connected to the cultural traditions of the individuals who migrated there over time, the level of education, the economy, the traditions, right? All involved, culture. Heart disease in the US from 1900 to 2007. And look, you can see the overall increase. And right around the year 1985, 1990, there was this kind of health revolution in America where people in masses started doing this new exercise called jogging, which helped bring down this heart disease rate. And you also know that stronger the economy, the more you can afford to purchasing power. And I'm sure all of you know Whole Foods is much more expensive than ShopRite. So the accessibility to that health food as well has economic implications, right? Heart failure is associated with your lifestyle, heart problems, high blood pressure, lung problems, and other medical conditions that have social, political, economic, and cultural implications. Diabetes is another one. 382 million people throughout the world have diabetes. It's just a long-term condition that causes high blood sugar levels. All right, this is another one of longevity, right? And you can see with changing lifestyles, living longer, the percent of people with diabetes is increasing, right? All right, also the last one, Alzheimer's disease, a disease of deterioration of the mind. And this is primarily people like over the age of 70. And now I think for women, it's about life expectancy is about 83, I believe. In the United States of America, I think it's still 79 for men. And this is something at the twilight of your life where people are experiencing more Alzheimer's. And there's been very recent breakthroughs with Alzheimer's treatments as well that are accessible in first world countries, right? So you could take a look at the percentage of people 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and 85 plus years. And this is interesting in yellow people. You can see why this is a disease related to changing lifestyles, living longer. People are living longer and thus more likely to experience diseases that were rare in the past when life expectancy never reached into the 60s and 70s. Most people with Alzheimer's are over 75 years old. All right, let's put on our thinking caps and let's perform some document analysis. Here is your prompt. Using the following documents, analyze the responses to the spread of influenza in the early 20th century. You've got 12 minutes. Fill out the grid, put some notes in, and a thesis. Ready? Go. Use the following documents, analyze the responses. Analyze the responses to the spread of influenza in the early 20th century. So it says analyze the responses. So when it says responses, you know there's going to be multiple responses. You know it's probably going to be similar responses, different responses. You don't know, right? So you look at the historical background, but you're looking for responses. So now what type of responses are there going to be? You always go to your SPICE. You always use that. So you have social, political, interaction with the environment, cultural, and economic. Those are the responses. That's what you're looking for, right? So document 7, 2 women recalling events from their childhood. These are people taking care of people. That is a social response, right? People taking care of people, social response. Document 9. This is 2-part right here. The Samoan Times admits that 8,000 of our small population of British Samoa have died, right? So that's maybe failure of a foreign government to be able to help its people. And then look at the bottom. The disease, however, was readily kept out of American Samoa. The success of the American government. Failures and successes from the political response. Then you have document 5, which was a little more obvious. This was a cultural, religious response, right? So now you have all your responses. So now when you come to the example statement, this could be one way you earn the point. People, keep it simple. They're asking you to analyze the responses, show all the responses, right? There was no way to group it, so they were all different. So there were a variety of responses to the spread of influenza in the early 20th century. The reason for this is because document 9 reveals government policies that aided or hindered the spread of disease. Document 5 reveals religious understandings and justifications for the epidemic. And document 7 reveals a social response where individuals simply tried to take care of the sick and dying. What do we take away from all of this? Diseases that persisted in areas of poverty looked like malaria, tuberculosis, among others, right? Parasites. Diseases with more cases because of people are living longer in first world strong industrial economies, heart disease and Alzheimer's. Global pandemics like the 1918 influenza outbreak had a variety of social, political, economic, cultural responses. When you see the phrase on the end of your College Board exam for the DBQ, if it says analyze the responses in a prompt, consider a variety of responses grouped along the College Board themes: social, political, interaction with the environment, cultural, and economic. I really, really, really hope this helps you.